Good day, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the Motoring Historian with John Summers and Mike Cammie. Mark, it's episode 8.
Man, popular demand keeps us coming back, doesn't it? Yeah.
It does. It does. I
Our
believe.
needy viewer or listener or whatever it is.
Well, I confess it's been a month or so since I last looked at the stats, but 112 episodes have been downloaded the last time I looked. Probably 100 of them's me testing, but there's still 12 there that is yeah. All right, well, moving on to our structured talk track, because we are organized, produced,
Professionals,
yeah, and we also don't pretend like there's not a talk track like so many of these other podcasters do, because when the microphone's in the room, the story that you tell is different, isn't it? We texted, didn't we, about Goodwood? Let's just talk a little bit about the experience that you had this last weekend, because you and I went to the festival. Is it the one where it's up his driveway? And that's
Frozenspeed, yeah.
That is a good event, but that is not on the same page as the full-on balls out racing on the track, just like it was in the 1960s, and the full everybody dressed up to get in the paddock. I remember I went to the first couple of those kind of meetings in the early 2000s before I moved. Awesome motoring events.
Yeah. Oh, mate. Yeah. I saw an ad. One of the things they sent out, an email a couple of days before, said something about it as the sort of the best motoring meeting in the world. And I mentioned that to my boss, who's Canadian, and his son's a sports journalist, mainly covering hockey because he's Canadian, ice hockey rather, but some other sports as well. And he's into his cars and his sim racing and stuff. And he said that's a very American thing to say, to sort of brag that it's the best of the world. And I said, yeah, that is right, a bit like the Super Bowl being the world championship for one country. But nonetheless, they are the best of it. And yeah, I mean, it's the members meeting, not the revival, so no one's in period dress, but and there's less people there, but the racing is the racing, and it's so cool. I mean, you can go there and see the cars being thrashed around, and then wander under the tunnel and into the pits and see those cars that were just thrashed around ticking themselves cool, with the people still driving around and putting tires on them and things like that, and you can just walk right up, and you could see them go out onto the track and everything. So, after spending the day there, it is difficult to argue. I was trying to think of it the other way around. What would I rather? If I could go to any other meeting, would I prefer to go to any other meeting, any other day's racing? And no, I wouldn't. I mean, the members meeting is the best. It's for me, specifically, for what I'm looking for racing, which is beautiful cars and old cars and interesting cars thrashed about properly with proper competitive racing with a sort of gentlemanly spirit to it. So it's, there are hardly any crashes. There's a bit of crashes from oversteering or exuberant driving, but there's no real sort of banging of fenders and things like that between they're shoving it up the inside when there's a cigarette papers gap and things like that still, but very little. It all done with a sort of handshake afterwards, kind of classic sort of stuff. So yeah, it is difficult to argue. It is the best. And we had a great day, full stop. I mean, we went. My wife's waiting for another operation. She's got limited mobility at the moment, so that'll give her a new lease of life. But so we're strolling in from the car park in the morning, and the little toot of the horn as I look in as Angie's getting a stick out of the back seat. And it's an old lady. Oh, well, that's an old lady. A mature lady in an Aston Martin Sportage, leaning out the window, with Goodwood Mobility Team written on the side, saying, "Would you like a lift?" So, well, thanks very much. So, spare us the 800-yard walk or something in, which for my wife at the moment is a bit of she's doing it. It's a bit of a struggle, but she wouldn't miss it for the world. And just whisked in, dropped inside. Separate entrance. There you go, sir. Certainly, sir. Can I scan your little? Because of course there's no ticket. The ticket is the little enamel metal badge on a little bit of a cord, and on the back they've got the little the little code that they just scan you in. So you've got a nice little memento afterwards. Nothing so a faux as an actual piece of paper. I don't need to bother with that. But yeah, so it was amazing, and I mean, so the racing was spectacular.
So when I went to I was a docent at the Black Hawk, well, I guess a slammer docent at the Black Hawk Museum, but certainly years ago we used to have a director, Tim McGray, English bloke, and he would, because he was well connected, he did like this speaker series, and it was people like Howden Ganley, who like raced Formula One and Can-Am, or Vic Elford, or we had Brian Redman. So all guys from kind of Tim's era, and a lot of them Englishmen who lived in America, because Tim's an Englishman who lives in America. He does the M1 concourse now. I'll do for anybody listening, it's worth looking at that concourse. Anything Tim does is really cool, and not for nothing. Like me, his first car was a Cortina. His was a 1600E. I think it was somewhat newer than mine was. Mine were 10 years old when I had them. So, but yeah, but old Tim, when we had these speakers, would always say to them, if you could do, he had these questions. If you if you were going to drive across America, what would you drive? Would you cannonball? Would you just cruise? And everybody was like cruise, and had different ideas about what they'd want to cruise in. Another question was, any event that you could go to anywhere in the world, any point in time, what would it be? And I reckon probably half the time people were like Goodwood Revival.
Yeah, I mean,
I like
the
members. I see why you like the members meeting though, because it's like, you don't have to bother with the dressing up. It's just there with the motor racing, so you can just go along and just be you and be immersed in a world. And for me, right, when I think about what's special about Goodwood, it's what's special about Vintage Sports Car Club events as well. I'm not saying there aren't events like this in America. I feel, Bonneville's like this where you can walk right up to the cars, where you can see the cars really closely, and where fundamentally, if you wanted to be a butt monkey, steal tools, get in guys' way, ask the driver dick-headed questions, you could do all those things. But there's a culture there that you don't do that. And yeah, the events are awesome because of it. Yeah,
I talked a bit about the just a bit of sort of soft stuff around the outside. It was just a very Goodwood thing to have happen, just to be actually chauffeured in because your wife's struggling a bit, and that it's not just any old car; it's an Aston Martin because it's Goodwood, of course. So,
what is the Sportage?
It's a sort of SUV. It's Aston's SUV.
Oh, really?
That's what it looked like to me. Yeah. I mean, nice enough. I mean, it's in the back of it for about 5 minutes. So
old Johnny Smith, he had a tweet this week that was like about the Huracan, about how not the Huracan, the Urus, the anus. He was like, I couldn't have an anus in my life. He was like hating on the anus, right? And there's been general hating on big SUVs because BMW have done this like 785 horsepower or 738 foot-pounds or so, some bonkers, stupid Rivian eating SUV, right? I'm disappointed by BMW's direction as well. I'm just going to say, but this is a separate point. Where was I going before I got distracted by the Rivians?
Oh, we were talking about being chauffeured in the Aston.
The Aston Martin Kia Sportage, Sportage, shooting brake.
Whatever, yeah.
Look, all of these things, they're bollocks until you lean on them. And then when you lean on them, you're like, geez, this thing does it all. Like, it's easy to hate a Cayenne when it's like you're in your cheap Mondeo looking at some soccer person in their, SUV in traffic, and you're thinking, what do you need your Cayenne turbo with its 550 horsepower for that? No, right? What you need the Cayenne turbo for is those. I guess it was the guy was he ran a green hedge fund when you could make money doing it, long time ago. Met him at a party, colleague, like partner of a colleague of my wife's. Um, he said to me he'd had 3 Cayenne turbos in a row because there was nothing else that fitted in his parking garage, had credibility at the country club, and could get to Tahoe, and could like climb a hill. That's what he said. It can accelerate uphill at Tahoe, which is like in a low pressure environment where like the big V8s aren't that good in the snow. It's a monster, and that kind of guy, you know. But for every one of those, you know, for every one bloke like that, there's a million of them that are Chelsea tractors, and you know,
that is
so
true.
maybe the answer is it ain't the shoe, it's how it's worn, right? That's
I suspect, yeah. And is it the right shoe for that foot, etc. But on the journeys that foot's taking. But I mean, but back to the racing. I mean, the racing was amazing. I mean, we watched. We were there on the Sunday. You do obviously the Friday, the Saturday, on the Sunday. Saturday's a couple of races, but it's largely qualifying. And some of the races are 2-part races, with Saturday 40 minutes and then Sunday 40 minutes. And it's often gentleman driver and professional driver with a pit stop of in between in the one race and stuff. So, but yeah, the Moss Trophy standout moment for that cracking race. E-types and AC Cobras, with the Cobra triumphing in the end. But I can't remember if it was that one or if it was the previous one, but the previous race. But there was a DB4 coming along the Lavant Straight at one point, and its front left tire exploded, completely carcass gone down onto the rim, piercing sparks everywhere, and it's coming towards us. I'm thinking he's not backing off, really. I'm like going to wonder if he's going to spin. Is that's the deal? Maybe he's worried about that. No, it didn't appear that way. And he just carried on in the gas, largely letting off. People were coming past him, but keeping to one side. And then sort of wove across the grass a bit onto the tarmac in front of the stand outside Woodcote that we were watching on the outside of the corner on the left. And then just drifted it past us on 3 into the Marshall's piece behind the tyre wall. No problem. 5 seconds of yellow flags, no stopped racing. Big round of applause from the crowd as the guy gets out and waves to the stands. But the best race, if you want to watch one, was, well, for me, the one that I saw that I really enjoyed the most was, where is it? The SF Edge Trophy, which was
Selwyn Francis Edge.
Yeah, it was a hard-fought battle between a Sunbeam Indianapolis and a Darracq 200 horsepower. And I mean, to say it went to the wire is understating it. It was decided after the chicane on the last lap.
Wow.
By 0. It was less. It was like half a second, or it was less than half a second. It was like 0.06 or something stupid. But yeah, I won't spoil it if you're gonna. It's on YouTube at the moment. I mean, and from what I recollect, and I might be wrong about this, Goodwood do all the races or highlights of all the races for about a month or so afterwards, and then they disappear off YouTube again. Because I know I can get access to them through the members ping on the webpage, and I can. One of the privileges you can watch all the full on boards and everything from previous years, and so watch it where you can is what I would say. Get on there and watch them, because there's some corking stuff. Just go to the GRRC page on YouTube and it's all there. But well worth it.
Well, I'll post the links, even though they'll go dead for those avid.
Well, the GRRC page will remain. It's just some of they sort of trim out some of the full races after a while. It seemed to me.
Yeah, no, that happened to me. I'd intended to go back and watch a live stream one time, and only to find it had been taken down. And at the time, I was like, but then you realise, well, it's that this would be a classic thing to charge for down the line, and it makes sense to do that. And you've got to find a way to finance what you're doing. The gentlemanly racing thing is I think a feature of Goodwood, and a feature of the way that motorsport used to be, due to the lack of safety, right? That you really made a point of showing respect for other people, I think, as a safety point. And I think this is why people like Sterling Moss had such a hard time with guys like Farina, because Farina raced in a way that didn't really have much respect for the other people that you were against. Edge, SF Edge, really a bloke worth reading the Wikipedia on the next time you're enthroned. It's that kind of thing. An early British motoring pioneer. Um, there's a amazing book that I read when you could buy a copy for £20, which you can't anymore, sadly, called 10 Years of Motors and Motor Racing, published in 1905. And it's by a guy, just stop and think about that. 10 Years of Motors and Motor Racing, published in 1905. And it begins by saying how sad the writer, Darracq, is that the early pioneering days are gone. And basically, the early pioneering days was when he and his buddy Edge, who were cycle racers, basically could get these engines on their bikes as well. So then you could ride the bike down the hill at high speed and then run it up the hill on the other side, maybe pedaling, maybe leaping off and pushing. And then, when at night, when you had punctures and things like that, you might not arrive at, the publican's house until 2 o'clock in the morning, and then he reject you because the horses don't like the smell of motorcycles. That kind of, it's full of those kind of pioneer adventures. Edge was that guy. I believe you talk about the Darracq 200 horsepower. I think there's only one.
Maybe.
I think it was a land speed record car.
Oh yeah, no, it is. Yeah, it's isn't it? It's like a 26-liter V8 or something.
Yeah.
It's 1906, I think.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Indianapolis Sunbeam was a significantly later car.
Oh yeah, it is. It was the earliest car in the field. He used one gear the whole lap.
Yeah, but the thing has a plane engine, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So it has a whole bunch of torque. Yeah. We should find video of that if people aren't familiar with the 200 horsepower Darracq. It's really a thing. So I have you well know, Mark, I have a total soft spot for those early aero engined kind of.
I mean, the Beast from Turin is in the same race every year.
Yeah,
like in about 8th, I think.
Yeah. So this, I believe, I met a bloke in a pub many years ago who was building that car. I believe it was a car that wasn't built, and he got the plans for it, and then found in a museum in Italy an engine, and then from then on it just turned into this crazy thing, that project that was completed. So my dream of the aero engine racing car that I had years ago at home in England, I feel it is actually coming to fruition. And the reason that I say that is I now have the shell of this gas drag to the Mercury, which, as you know, I've had for a decade or so. But it's there. That's the shell. I've had the back axle. It's a state correct 70 Bronco rear axle. I have that. And now I have this date correct 428 that sits in this giant destroyed Thunderbird at the moment, ready to be liberated. And so perhaps the other update I should have is Mark has spoken to a bloke down in El Segundo who has a business building top loaders, because Mark is concerned that not just any four-speed top loader is going to do. You have to have one that has the biggest input shaft, the most number of splines, and the most number of splines on the output shaft as well, because otherwise he reckons this 428, I don't know what the horsepower and torque figures were like from the factory, but Mark thinks with a rebuild and a mild cam, Mark thinks 500 horsepower, which,
nice.
That's going to be plenty, isn't it, for that Mercury, which has no interior. And for reference, it's a 62 Meteor. Can
we do it can we take it to Speed Week next year?
I mean, next year, maybe in the year 25, no, at some point, right? Yeah, it's potentially there. I will include a link to this Falcon, which is built the way that it's going to be, called the Hound Dog. The Meteor is going to be called Position Eliminated, which was the way I was fired from my last job in the Valley. They can't actually say you're shit at your job, you're fired. They have to say, we've eliminated your whole position. We're actually not going to do any kind of sales anymore. We've eliminated your whole position. I know you thought we were a software sales house, but we've eliminated your position as salesman. Position eliminated. The woman's name was Celia, and she is, without question, one of the most awful people I ever met in my life. I was probably an arrogant prick to her, in fairness, but you know, I'm ready to. I just confessed. I just confessed, didn't I? I just said I may, in some way, have been responsible for Celia firing me. It was just possible that I might have been. You said a Dolomite was pissing oil when we were texting. My dad had a Dolomite. You know what I remember about it? When I was a small boy, before I even moved to High Wycombe, when we lived in Gloucester, I was having a fight with one of my friends, and Dana's walking on the ceiling and giving us sound effects. I was having a fight with one of my friends, and I rolled and knocked this, I guess, this dry stone wall. Either way, a piece of dry stone wall fell 20 feet onto my dad's navy blue Triumph Dolomite and put this huge dent in the roof. And my dad was really peed off at me, to express it mildly. I always felt bad about that. When I see a similar dent, I saw a similar dent in the hood of a car just recently, and it takes me right back to the guilt that I felt over causing damage to this Dolomite. The one you saw was pissing oil at the track.
Yeah, although if you want to see sort of handsome damage, then look no further than the I think it's still on at the moment, at least the replay of the race with the Camaro versus the Gitaines Capri. That got a proper front left clout, but was still expertly pedaled round at maximum velocity, irrespective of its cosmetic roughage.
I saw a picture of it on Twitter, and obviously when it had been parked up, instead of just taking the fender off, they just rolled the fender out over the tire, because the shape over the tire is perfect, but the fender's like totally wrinkled and it's lost the headlight and the whole piece.
Dude, like the guy that was, I mean, in the Moss Trophy, a guy in a hard top E-type, lightweight E-type, it comes up the Lavant straight, goes to take the guy on the inside, and then the guy didn't quite see him, so moved across a bit. So there was enough space, maybe, but he went onto the grass anyway, and he was coming at a rate of knots, so he passed it enough that he was going to be plenty past. So he therefore couldn't brake properly before Woodcote. So when he got off the grass, he stamped on the brakes as hard as he could, and then tried to tip it in on the line he'd need to be, and to drift it round, and the back came round on him, and he sort of double pirouetted around, and again off the brakes on the grass, back on the brakes on the tarmac again, and rolled up to nerve dink against the tire wall, and again smashed up the back a bit of a recce round, like from the driver's seat, back in the race. No messing about. Racers be racers. Will it start? Yep. Does it drive properly? Yep. Well, I'm not even coming in. Carry on. So it's full of that sort of stuff, and it's oh god, seeing the old Capris and stuff. And that 1982 or whatever it is, that chap had did you see that one today? He had Mugello. It's a video of the Zakspeed Capri, the bright yellow one, the Jägermeister one, is it? I think the bright orange one. Sorry,
Yeah.
Turbo Capri being rinsed around Mugello. It sounds fabulous, but it's lovely to see.
Yeah, the Zakspeed did Mark 1 Capris as well, but they're known for like the Mark 3, which is like it was a 1.7 turbo 4 that made like 600 horsepower or something. It was I'm not DTM mutant kind of a thing.
And I mean, and look, I mean, we talked a bit about over the WhatsApps rather about that 935. The body kit on that Zakspeed Capri is similar in the sense that it is stepped out as shit from the side of the car at the bottom to create those sort of hovercraft like skirts on the side. And boy, oh boy, does it make it look punchy.
We really should pause and pay tribute to what DTM was conceived to be, which was this sort of Formula One of saloon car racing, where anything goes, where they created something that was almost closer to NASCAR than our own BTCC, where even in the 80s, do you remember the era of Cleland, that those Cavaliers were limited to 8,500 RPM, to keep the horsepower down, so you couldn't there was no building a really racy engine to give you more power. They literally, kept the tires narrow and the playing field very level. So tell me, before we move on from Goodwood, what was the best car you saw in the car park? Not in the event, when you were just walking in. You mentioned the Aston.
Oh, in the car park.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What would you want to? What? Yeah.
What was it? There was a gunmetal 550. I didn't look to see if it was on a stick, but if it was, that.
All right. Good answer. So answer me this. Moving on to my recent couple of weeks en France. When we were there 20 years ago, did they have all that traffic calming in the villages? I don't think they did. Now every village has got flower pots or designated parking, so you have to slow down and stop, and they prioritize traffic from the other way, So, or they do this business where instead of having just a slow bump that you can, if you hit it at the right speed, it sort of isn't there. They do these ones where it goes up and then it goes level and then it goes down. So there's no option. You have to slow down. I'm not saying I want to speed through French villages. I'm just saying that I feel like in an effort to make you slow down, they're effective, but they make driving just so much more annoying. I also, you not spent any time in Paris recently. You were aware that they'd done this 19 mile an hour, 30 kilometer an hour speed limit.
I had heard rumor,
and so my fear was that the whole place, it was going to be like everyone had eaten about 15 Valium. So
it's not very French though.
Well, exactly right. Not very French. That was my concern. I mean, I don't want pedestrians to be injured any more than the next man, and I recognize that there's not much to be gained, and the green benefits are dubious, but I'm just saying that I get moved in the right direction and all of that. So I'm not objecting on principle. I'm just saying that I was worried it would change the character of Paris. But I needn't worry. It seems everyone just drives just the same as they ever used to. It's just the same. The periphery rendered.
It's not like Dodgems like Rome, where half the cars at the side of the car are smashed to smithereens. But still.
Yeah. Rome, it does take some. Rome does take some getting used to. I remember when I first moved there, looking at the wet cobbles with the traffic going everywhere, thinking, don't think I needed my Gixxer here. Thinking it was all right to leave that at home.
That would have been rough.
Yeah. So what I was struck by was that out on the periphery, it was less the lower speed limit. I'm not saying because they've lowered speed limits everywhere, but the traffic did seem slower on the periphery, and it seemed somewhat less scary than it had done before. Although I gave the cab driver that we took from the middle of Paris out to Orly Airport, where we picked up a rental, I gave him the biggest tip I've ever given anybody, on account of the way that he just dexterously navigated traffic, in terms of not in terms of jumping lines where he could, but not being too aggressive. And in terms of when we drove past the entrance to the rental car place, and as we sailed past the entrance, Dana did what she did to me, which was, "Oh, the rental cars are over there." Like, much as say, like, what? Like, I knew they were there all along. What are you doing driving past them, you fool? I should have been driving, right? She did that to him. And Ollie had already been sick out the window of the car, and he'd been really nice about that. So I was like, you know what? This might be. So what he did? He reversed out of departures, and then across the chevron-y bit to get into the rental car bit. It was really some impressive rule bending that earned an unwarranted, and I think probably the largest percentage tip I've ever given. Like, I was really
well earned.
I was that impressed. So we did these 24 hours of like motos, 24 hours they call it, but it's basically like, so it's the Bugatti circuit at Le Mans.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember how before you go you look at the pictures and so on, and then when Dana won't moving around again, before you go to Le Mans you look at the pictures and it's the fair and the glowing brake discs and all of that. And it's only when you get there that you realize that actually it's the motorcycles bouncing off the rev limiters endlessly, and the smell of campfires, and the fact that you're wet because it rained earlier, and the only way you're going to stay warm is by having another beer. You remember how that's what the actual experience is, right? The motorcycles were that and some. It had all of the kind of people who go home, go off the track. All of those people didn't come to the motorcycles. The only people at the motorcycles were the people who'd done things like staple their €2 cup round their necks so they couldn't lose it. We saw a number of people with beer cups round their necks, the plastic ones, like stapled, so they weren't gonna. There was no way they had to buy another beer, but there was no way they were spending €10 to get the cup. They only needed to spend €8 on that beer, and yeah, my word. The other thing I would say about it was we had a classic Le Mans experience in that we got to the hotel, checked in, all of that, drove back out to the circuit, and 100 feet away from a roundabout, like 2 car lengths away from a roundabout where we were going to get into the circuit and park, 200 feet from there, the road was closed. And I was like, well, we should find out what's happening. And Dana's like, oh, because she knows that means her, because I'm not going to try and speak French, and she does well with the French. She got out of the car, right? And came back to the car and was like, the cop's not answering any questions. He's just ignoring everybody. So like we sit there for about half an hour. Everyone's sitting there, I did set a trend. I went and took a pee in the bushes, and then loads of other people did. So, I did demonstrate that little bit of cultural leadership there. Putting one in. I thought putting one in for the British team there, the first to piss on French countryside, just by the Porsche curves. Just the road was just that's exactly where we were. Anyway, it opened up again, and turned out it was really quite lucky, because the parking we were going to was actually one of these campsites that were full of Frenchmen with sports bikes who were just bouncing them off the rev limiters at deafening volume and setting off fireworks, and generally the whole thing feeling like the set of a Mad Max movie. I mean, there's really, it was like Mad Max meets like a Slayer gig when it had rained. That was how it felt. So as we basically missed the parking, we're driving away from the circuit. There was some street parking that just came free, so I did a quick U-turn. We got in there, and so we got in that first evening. We had a little look around, walk the track, got a lie of the land, Next morning, we got up and I was like, we're not sitting in that traffic again. So we walked, which at the time seemed like a good idea. We'd walk across Le Mans, about an hour's stroll, pick up some bakery. Well, I don't know how well you know Le Mans, but that bit at the beginning of the Le Mans movie, that beautiful town square and the cathedral and all of that, that's the old town, which is in the north. The bit to the south, that's the bit that, maybe you
A bit
don't
like
want to walk to.
industrial zones and stuff. It's like
Oh,
from
that's
what I
that's
recollect.
where there's the 5-story apartment buildings that look like you wouldn't want to be there after dark,
Yeah.
which only occurred to us as we were moving through them. Well, it didn't occur to me until we were leaving, when Dana was like, we'll get a taxi. And I was like, we're going to walk. She was like, we'll get a taxi. And I was like, no, there's no taxis going to come. Like, what are you? The Uber wasn't going to come. Anyway, so that's so that was Saturday evening. More Saturday morning, we arrive at the circuit, right? And it's warm up. It's already, the schedule's late. Where warm up was meant, we were going to miss it, but actually the bikes were out on track there. And as we come in the entrance, we're right up on the outside of the end of the pit straight, just as they like cut off to get the bike lent over for the swerve before the Dunlop Bridge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at that moment, the fastest bike, the Work Suzuki, comes right up and past with like a howl out of this straight Aquaprovich, and the guy leans over, and Dana goes, "Wow, that was fast." And that's really it, right? It doesn't get it, it's really that, just over and over and over and over again, until it blasts you into absolute like oblivion. And that's why you're like, Dana was like, you're gonna have beer already? I was like, well, what else are we gonna do? Like you have to, like, so we ate sugary food and we walked the circuit, but it was windy, like, so it was bloody cold. We were out on the backstretch, right? A section that Ollie had picked out because they went fast there. Because we'd looked at the circuit before, and he was like, "Where do you think they'll be fastest?" And I picked this bit of the straights. We were there, and he was watching them go by. And this old French bloke taps me on the shoulder and is telling me how cool Ollie is to be as enthusiastic as he was, and knowing the different riders and all of that. So I had a cool, that was a vindicating moment. But yeah, we had like a sort of meltdown of energy about, because the race start, we were at the circuit at 9 o'clock in the morning. 10 a.m. was a historic race, and on the front was, like, I don't know, a 999 Ducati, but next to him was this replica Schwantz S-Rad Gixxer, right? S-Rad. Now, there were K5s in the field. There were two K1s. So K5s are the, like, the pinnacle analog sports bike, 160 horse. These were maybe 750s, right? Not the thousands, but the K1 is the one that, like, my first bike, where the headlight's wide, for people who are not up on their Gixxer law, one headlight wide, as opposed to one headlight batwing style for the K5. The intakes at the side, the two air intakes, the dead giveaway for the body style. So there were K5s, there were Ducatis, CBRs, like a 954 CBR, we call it in America. So that's like a 2002. And there was a CBR F4 as well. So I don't know what the engine capacity was. There was a ZX10, like my 05 ZX10. There was one of those. Well, I say like mine. This one wasn't wrecked, but there was a ZX10. Yeah, and they were, to be honest, pretty slow looking in comparison to the bikes that were actually involved in the full on championship racing, and like the endurance world championship, they call it, and that's what they call the series. Yeah, so the historic race was pretty good. We were in the grandstands for the starting ceremony. people singing the singing of the French national anthem was really cool moment. They run across the track to leap on the bikes before the start. That kind of ruled as well. So that was fun to watch. All round, extremely enjoyable. We walked the course. The wind was howling cold. My family were pretty, pretty. It was manfully done to survive, because my word, the wind was cold. And I guess the close of play saw us having walked a lap and being absolutely exhausted in the visitor center place, being like, what are we going to do? We don't want to eat more crappy food, or drink more beer, those of us that can. But yeah, so we agreed that we would go repair, because I was like, we just need to be somewhere like out of the noise and the cold. And the others weren't really thinking clearly. But I was like, we need to, and I wanted to have something left in the gas tank, because I knew that we were going to have to walk back across there. Where it was only when we left and the other two, it came to the realization that there wasn't going to be any taxi or Uber, and that was unrealistic, and that people were doing things like sleeping in Renault Clios, like where they folded the back seats down and the front seats forward, and were, people were breaking out the picnic tables on the sidewalk, blocking the pavement completely. English word and American, look at that. Blocking this, like people are like, breaking out the cheese and the ham and saying,
Tablecloth?
No, actually
Oh.
not.
Quite a lot of people at the French services, and I've got to say, I think we may have discussed this before on a previous cast. The péage services, part of what you pay for on the péage is the péage services. And I don't mean the péage services like that are like everywhere services, like, where there's loads of stuff and like you go in and fight to get to the carsy and all that sort of thing. I mean the péage services where there's just loos and quite a big, nice, woody picnic area with little like gravity drives and stuff, and lots of picnics, rest areas and stuff. Because the French are like, well, why would I need to pay for your shitty food? I want to use your nice road. So give me some bathrooms. I don't want to mix with that. I just want to go and have a nice place to relax and sit and listen to the birds. All right, with the cars in the background, and have a picnic table. And so they take their own food. Well, I saw more than one people with a bottle of wine and a tablecloth and a nice setup and some pate and something. You're like, well, you've got glorious food. It's a nice part of the world. Why not just, even on the side of the motorway? It's pretty nice. It's.
Well, yeah. So we so we had to walk back, didn't we? And then at that point, we had to walk back.
Queue griping.
Sorry.
Queue griping from small and large.
No, everyone was too tired. And then as we moved into a fairly scuzzy area, too scared. And then as we realized that the walking route was taking us the direct route out of town, which was parallel to the railway, but meant that there was probably 1.5 mile section where it was just a narrow walkway along the side of the railway track, where there was no, egress, right? So if anything happened, there was, So that caused some fear, which was imbued further walking. But by the time we got back to the Campanie, both adults were, all members of the party were shattered, right?
I can see why.
So we sat downstairs, had pizza, and I had a beer, because I was, and we approached the topic with Ollie twice of not going back. But each time he was adamant that we should go back, right? And he'd had his cherry Coke, so he was all like ready for it. So I was like, you know what? You're only here once. We've got to do it, right? But this is, so here we are with an 8-year-old leaving the hotel at 20 to 11 at night to drive back out to the circuit, when we have to come back to the hotel, sleep, get up the following morning, drive back to Paris, drop the rental car, and then be at the airport to fly out. And then the flight is at 6:30, and we're scheduled to get back to the West Coast at 8:50, and then he's going to be in school the following morning. My wife's going to just do a normal day's work that following morning. Well, not a normal day's work, a day's work after the. Anyway, that's how.
After a bunch of time off, yeah,
No,
yeah, for
but
sure.
but if you think of it, right, you've got the 6:30 plus the time difference. You've got all that time on the plane, so in theory, you could be rested. In reality, we've all been struggling with the jet lag somewhat this week, but it was always going to be that way. Yeah. So you get the car, get the rental car out of this annoying, stupidly small spots. Why are European car parks designed to be just a little bit too small for the car? It's really annoying. It's really annoying. Why not make them bigger? There's so much totally unnecessary damage. Like you could reduce the number of spots by 10% and make everybody's life tons easier. I don't understand it. It's really asinine.
What about the 10% of people who can't now park in the town?
Yeah. Anyway, the other thing about the car park, right? No lights, pitch black, movement sensing. Go off the moment you stop moving. So that's right. You get out of the car to check you've parked all right in the spot, and the light goes out, plunging the whole floor of the car park into pitch black. I mean, talk about saving a tiny amount of power whilst inducing terror into any lone female or indeed lone individual in the building. It's just absolutely. Anyway, so we did make our way back to the track. And, by that time, right, all the Frenchmen, I say Frenchmen, Englishmen as well, anybody there is hammered, right? Because it's so cold that you must have been drinking the beers all day to stay warm. Europop. They've got Europop going, like blasting volume. They've got these like French heavy metal bands, kind of like, France's answer to Linkin Park. They've got these bungee things where you can like get in a ball and then it springs you like 100 feet up into the air. You couldn't bloody pay me to get on it. The whole piece. Ollie was like, we've got to sit in the grandstands. So we sat in the grandstands, and as they cut off, there's flames out of the exhaust pipe of the bikes, blue flames. So that's pretty compelling. And then he was like, I was sitting there thinking, how are we going to tear him away? Because I knew Dana could go at any time after we'd been there for about half an hour. How are we going to tear him away? And just at that moment, he looked at me and was like, I think I've had enough. I think we can go home and sleep now. And I was like, rock star. So we did. And the run up to the airport was fine. And all was right with the world.
Cool, man. Well, look, it's on my list to do that, or the Ball d'Or or something like that. I want to do one of those.
One evening when we were staying in the Loire, I was like, I can't take it anymore. These garages I've seen at the side of the road, I'm going to go out and look at some of them. So because we passed two that evening, just local to where I was staying. And then there was another one that we'd passed where I had seen in it amongst other things, a Simca 1100 from the 1970s. But what had caught my eye that was interesting was a Renault Safran with alloy wheels on it. And it was a Monaco, and I thought it was probably a Monaco, but the bi-turbo had those wheels on it, didn't it? And I thought, wowee, if ever there was a car to buy out of a French junkyard, it would be a Renault Safran bi-turbo. That would be a thing to have. Anyway, it wasn't a Monaco. It wasn't a bi-turbo. It was a Monaco. And that first evening when I went out, I couldn't find it anywhere. It was further away from the house, and it needed another expedition later in the trip to find that car. But in the village we were staying in, there was a bloke who it was like buying and selling cars, and he had a bunch of stuff like few €1,000 runabouts at the front. He obviously did accident repair as well, but round the back it was all he had a Neue Klasse BMW 2002 that was like rusting away, 3 series of all ages and vintages. He had, which I particularly liked, a Renault 19 16 valve in blue with the yellow square fog lights and the original alloy wheels. He had a same blue Clio. It looked like it had Williams alloys on it. I don't think it was a Williams. I think it was just a Clio 16 valve. But either way, like Mark 1 Clio 16 valve, 2 Mazda RX-7s, both Mark IIs. I don't know what the model designation is. Isn't it FA, FB, and FC? But either way, not the first generation ones. The second generation ones, not the really cool, swoopy third generation ones. The second gen ones, mid-90s kind of. But 2 of them, obviously something the bloke was interested in and had been collecting. And as I was there taking photos, I was thinking to myself, if you were here, I bet you he knows exactly what those cars need. So you could come to a deal with him where you bought the car and paid for him to do the work to get it to a stage where you could drive it. And see, I love that kind of car because that way only the work gets done that you want to get done. If he comes to you and says it needs a new steering rack, that'll be €500. You just do it. If he comes to you and says, there's a crack in the spotlight and the headlight doesn't work, you say, fix the headlight and don't care about the spotlight. You build it your way, just like that E55 I've got. The body's terrible still, but mechanically it's great. And because it pulled to one side, I did all the rubbers, steering and suspension and tie rods and all of that. So it's tight as you like, which I was thinking about that story I told on this pod a while ago about following that Rimac over Laurel's grade. If I hadn't have spent all that money on the rubber at the front of the thing, there's no way that Benz would be as good as it is. Never was I more grateful that I'd spent that money. So yeah, so that was the one place I looked at. Other place I looked at was a closed Renault dealer, and it had less interesting stuff. It had. Did you remember the Peugeot 206 station wagon? The one that was like, it was like a little estate, but it was like a 3-door estate. There was one of those that was completely sound. It had been hit on the rear corner, and it's obviously an asshole of a body repair, and the car wasn't really worth it, and they just let it sit. There's one of those. There was a Megane convertible, which I didn't care about, but the era of folding hard tops. Yes, you're making a rude gesture to it. Yeah, I know. I was getting carried away. What I did like was there was a green Renault Laguna. Now, not that era, that first era that you and I will remember, the Mark 1 Laguna. This was a Mark 2. I never really seen one in super clapped out condition before with missing wheel caps. It looked great. It looked really good. But it set me thinking about Renault Lagunas, because I had that 3-litre 24 valve stick shift one that was really a great car. It really was a good car. Bit 90s and blobby and plasticky. Do you remember how slippy the leather was? I don't think I'd still want it now. But as a contrast to a BMW 323, which was the other thing I could have had, like an early E36 323, it was faster, better equipped, more comfortable. It was just, it was just a ton more car, and I don't regret.
I like Renault. I got, you and I both have enjoyed our Renault products. They're
and for that reason, I was just gonna pay some homage to the BTCC Renault Laguna, because I feel like they really
our menu spec. Are we talking here?
Yeah, well, early they were yellow, weren't they? And then later on, they went to that Nestle Blend 37. And those era of cars, that was like the era of super touring when they were able to get away with like extra wings and that kind of stuff. And that Blend 37, Williams built, because they had Williams build the cars. Those Williams built super touring Lagunas. Those are just awesome. I still think the clamshell bonnet, the way the hood goes over the headlights in that clamshell, I think that's a really great design feature.
Yeah, and, nice touch.
I'm even saying this because I was watching a Salvage Rebuilds UK video the other day, and they'd been to a classic car auction, and the comment was at one point, whilst looking at a green R plate Renault Laguna in similar spec to your red pool car of much abused red pool car of many years ago, the comment was, well, I'm not even sure if that's a classic. And it does just go to show it depends what your use pattern was, because for me, we got so much use of that red Laguna pool car, company pool car of yours, that or of whatever software house it was you were working at the time. Microsoft Training you were selling at that time, wasn't it? But yeah, whatever. That Laguna, fully a classic car.
And dude, the other thing that's you ought to be bear mentioned here for the anyone who played with their PlayStations and Mega Drives and all that sort of stuff. Mega Drives later than that, but still, Toka touring car, one of the bastardiest time trials that you had to do. It was one of the races you had to do for expert, because obviously we used to invest, as you know, me and the Greep and various others used to invest significant time in thrashing around on our consoles. Was in the rain on expert, playing on at Thruxton in the Alain Menu Laguna. That we were playing a season, and the final race was to win that race, and it was a 2-race meeting, and the curves out the back, in the pissing rain. Church, and then before and stuff, those bits, it's so high speed, and one mistake and you're spinning off towards the tire barriers in the distance and stuff. It's horrendous.
That back section of Thruxton is British club circuit at its very best. And I was naive enough to think that culture existed everywhere. It doesn't. That's only Britain. We really have a special thing with circuits like Alton and Donington and Thruxton and these Cadwell. I went to Cadwell. Yeah. Cadwell is, they talk about it being like the Nürburgring of the North. My God, there's one turn that's like downhill, and then at the bottom of the hill it's a left turn. So you're like heavy braking downhill, like a hell of a circuit. Motorcycle. Yeah. That's the one you must have seen.
Is that the one with the jump?
Yeah, with the wheelie, where you can wheelie over it.
Well, you can see the pictures of the sports bikes, like with the back foot 18 inches, the back wheel 18 inches off the ground.
Yeah, you're actually a bit faster if you don't lean on it.
Yeah. It doesn't stop them every meeting with some picture of a guy in full leathers looking as if he's straight out of a movie poster, with it fully off the ground.
I actually saw like a really clippy in my feed kind of thing of some bloke over egging it and the bike going up totally over the top of him, like full wheelie, and then throwing the bike away. The computer game reference is well timed. We've been meaning to talk about Ross Chastain and his wall running. Fill me in, because you sent me the article and I deliberately didn't read it because I was like, we'll talk about it on the pod. Fill me in with what you know, and because this was some time ago now, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, basically, I can't remember where I saw it, and obviously, if anyone hasn't seen it, feel free to YouTube it up. I mean, it was Ross Chastain in the last race. I think it was Martinsville. I don't know the circuit, but it was an oval, as you would expect. But the ovals can be complicated, and he needed to gain. The TLDR, as you said earlier in the pod, is he needed to gain 5 places, and he had essentially one long left-hander to do it. and he wasn't going to do it. So he'd been playing. He thought back to his days of, Lord Cheaty McCheat, a classic. If you've played any of your stock car stuff on console of choice, is to pin it and wall run. And he was like, "Well, look, I ain't making it into the Champ 4 if I don't come 5th and or 4th or whatever it was. So I need to gain 5 places." So he just on the back straight, just went out as close as he could to the wall, gunned it. And of course, NASCAR's being NASCAR's, the way those things pick up pace, and just kept it pinned and just took his hands off the steering wheel and let it wall run and gained all the places, ended up running into the back of the guy over the start finish, having just overtaken the bloke that he needed to overtake, and made it into the final 5. So NASCAR 2K5, I think on GameCube was his selection of choice, and that's where he learned it. And much congratulations even from his fellow competitors who were like, WTF, did he just really pull that shit off? And unfortunately, NASCAR have said that although that stood, they won't let anyone do it again. They're not going to change the rules, but they're going to use existing rules to essentially disqualify you if you do it again. Which, I mean, I suppose I could see where they're coming from. But on the other hand, it is NASCAR, which encouraged rubbing racing for years. And it was the most exciting thing I've seen in NASCAR in forever. So it depends what you think of the sport's for, I suppose.
I think it's about the most NASCAR thing ever to be like, I'm behind, so I'll try this crazy stunt because it worked. It worked on a computer game. It might just work in real life. There's something very NASCAR and there's something very 21st century. It's really maybe this is why I wanted to talk about it, because it combines together this NASCAR pedal to the metal way of being with I think it's a fabulous story. I think it's absolutely a legendary moment. I feel my whole life I want to shake Ross Chastain's hand for that instant thought. Could you? And you did. That's what
that it paid off is perfect. He needed 5 places and he got 5 places. Didn't get 6, got 5.
Yeah,
that was it.
Yeah, what a magnificent thing. Yeah. The notion of taking your hand off the steering wheel and just keeping your foot in the throttle is really a thing. Yeah.
Because they said to him afterwards in the interview, like, what did you think about it? And he was like, well, as I was doing it, I suddenly thought, what if there's like a little gap, or what if there's like a door, or like, what if there's an access thing? Oh shit! But it all worked out. Like, high five to you, sir.
That is so NASCAR that you're committed before you're like, well, there could be this or there could be that. Yeah. It's like John McGuinness saying he doesn't like going around the TT course in a car because he's going that slowly. You notice things, obstacles and things that you don't notice at race speed. Yeah. So my time in France was spent with this Fiat 500X, which they promised me.
I've got one booked from Bordeaux in a few weeks.
Oh, you have? Oh.
Well, I've got a small hatch mini Fiat 500 Renault.
You've been doing the Fiesta ST. You said you'd done the Fiesta ST to around to Goodwood there. I have been doing the Fiesta ST, and I feel like driving the Fiesta ST for a little bit. I've like cleaned myself of the experience of the Fiat 500X. Now, the first thing I should say is that it has 120 horse, and it actually does all right. Does all right with that. It's better than you would anticipate for that. It's pulls beyond 90 miles an hour. I don't want to encounter French Mr. Plod. That was enough for me. The speed limit's 130. People do 150-ish. It'll do that all day long. Fine. We had 4 and 5 adults in it, sometimes with luggage, sometimes without. At no point did it feel like too much and overborne and all of that. It was a pretty new car. It had like under 2,000 kilometers on it, like 1,800 kilometers on it when I picked it up. I had about 3,500 on it when I dropped it off. I wasn't gentle on it, but I wasn't abusive. I had an Alpha 147 years ago that, albeit I used it on the Targa Florio course, but under gentle usage, that thing developed noises and was clearly just shittily built. Let's be candid.
Yeah.
Whereas this was not like that. I feel like I have a fairly high tolerance for plastic interiors, and sitting here now, there's nothing wrong with the interior, but I'm coming from a 20-year-old Mustang and a Fiesta ST, so it's the infotainment. We were looking for like, well, how long will it go before it runs out of gas? And it didn't seem to have that trip computer function there about it, but fundamentally it just did the job and was all right. And I guess the transmission was fine. If it was that bad to drive, I'd have had more to complain about. It just leaves you feeling a little bit underwhelmed and disappointed. And I reached out to that YouTuber Chops Garage. He has a black Jaguar XF 3-liter diesel sport. It was a one-owner car that's done 160,000 miles, full Jaguar service history, black exterior, black wheels, looks the absolute business, 443 foot-pounds of torque. I couldn't help myself. I hit him up on Instagram, 3,600 pounds. And I'm like, I so would if I could really afford to piss money away. But I can't, and the car, I wouldn't need it until if I was going to do Le Mans next year. So I'm like, can't do that car. But in comparison to this Fiat 500, I was just thinking of that Jaguar the whole time. I was obsessed by that Renault Clio, by the Chamard, by the 1916 valve. It wasn't a Chamard, it was a hatchback. I was obsessed by that for a bit, to the extent that I went onto a European website, or European, or what's it called? I'll look it up on my phone. But I went onto a website, and it's called Auto Scout 24. That's apparently the place to look for cheap cars across Europe. I went on there. There's half a dozen 1916 valves, and I was looking at them and thinking, you know what, maybe they're not as rare as I thought they were. How much horsepower do you think they have? Do you think it had? Take a guess. Don't Google it. Just pull a number out of your ass.
I don't know. I mean, the thing that would have made it zippy would have been that it would have been light.
Yeah.
But not that it would have had lots of
horsepower.
horsepower.
And what we thought my Cortina 1.6 with 75 horsepower was pretty.
Yeah, I was gonna guess 85 or 90 about what my Sierra 2-liter had.
Yeah,
was I think 90.
135.
God damn!
It would have been meaningfully fast then. But,
it would have been.
Next to your Fiesta ST. This is the.
I mean, look, it would have been quick. It would still be quick. I mean, it would feel fun and fast and rattle canny, and therefore more intense. In the same way as if you get in a go-kart or on a motorbike or on a bit.
Now I wish I tried to buy it off him. Now you're making me wish I'd tried to buy it off him again.
I mean, but dude, I feel you on the cars. I mean, I'll be annoyed in the little dirt box of whatever they give me anyway. But I always want something of the country that I'm coming from. So I'm hoping whatever it is, it's French, not Italian. I'm hoping it's the Renault or the Park or whatever.
Yeah. No, I was promised. Sixt promised me a Peugeot 308, and I was keen for that. And they had 208s, but with hindsight, that would have been too small.
That is the challenge, especially with en famille. But
all roads lead to that black Jaguar. I'm telling you.
Well, this is why when I was discussing the French thing with Angie, and I was like, look, I can't bear coming back here regularly, which we will be, and having some shitty ass rental car all the time. And the solution to that is just keep the ST, because the ST and have it here. And the ST wouldn't be it would be great in the south of France and near the Pyrenees roads, but it's right hand drive.
Yeah.
I need a left hand drive, so have that here, and
Yeah.
it's Angie's car anyway, so she's fully familiar and comfortable and happy with it. So therefore, and I don't want to sell it anyway. I love it. So it's just
and the values are gonna turn.
it is a 5-star classic. Yeah, I mean, I know you said on one of your tweets that it's the car's fault. It's like slow. It's a Euro shitbox fast. It's sublime, and that is true. And it's not actually crap. It's like around town. It's just a normal hatchback car. It's just basically fine, comfortable, efficient, does everything. Good MPG. You know what I mean? Like pretty much everything you want. All the electric mod cons, all the bits and bobs. But you are not wrong that when you take it out and you go from doing 3,500 revs before you're shifting gear to 6,000 revs before you're shifting gear, and you're hustling it through the sexy little 6-speed box. God damn, is it a beautiful chassis?
The way when you turn in, you come in the gas and it just hunkers down. And as you pass the apex, you like exit the turn with it being like, what do you mean? I could have gone through 20 miles an hour faster. And you're thinking,
pussy.
This
Exactly.
is unbelievable. This is suddenly it's gone from being like a boring hatchback to being like a track car, to being a car that can hang not just at the Nürburgring, at Spa. It can it can turn in at insane speeds and it feels good.
Yeah. I passed at Spa in the Megane, or the RS Megane, a first generation well, not first generation, but like the previous ST. So the little boxy sort of version of the previous version being hustled around, pedaled around there at high velocity.
I
They were having
passed
a great
him.
time.
I passed him and then let him repass because I realized I could learn from his lines. He
was quick, yeah.
He had better lines than me, and watching that because it was an English registered car, wasn't it? Following that car round, I was thinking to myself, this can really hang. I was having to feather a little bit on the straights. That was all. To keep him ahead and learn his lines. Yeah. All right.
Cool.
All right. So quick fire. What's your favorite car right now?
I do want one, as I say, I want one of these Alpha Quadrifolios. That's quite looming large. And then I also, at the other end of the spectrum, when I was when I was down in France last, there was a sort of horrible coloured, I can't remember what it was, a sort of weird maroony brown Renault 21 Turbo that I quite coveted. Like my neighbour's ass. I quite coveted it. It's there's a German company that does that when we were at the Ring. You remember that there was that Audi that had been done by Stance Works, and the name says it all. It sat like a fucking boss. Like that. I don't particularly like the particular Audi. I can't remember exactly which one it was, but god damn, it looked amazing what they'd done with it, with the rims and the stands and the kit and everything. Well, that 21 sat roguishly at the side of the grey, and I passed it a couple of days in a row and thought, that is a cool car. I would have that.
Yeah. I have a super soft spot for, I don't know what it is about Renault turbo cars. I have a super soft spot. I love the 21 turbo. I remember the launch commercial. The car was red. They used I feel free. Do you remember that? Is it cream? Is it a cream shine? It was 175 horse, black leather interior. I actually have a search of them on Gumtree. It like pops in every now and again. There's few in Britain, but yeah, I'm sure more in France. Also, do you remember when we were at DHS years ago, Helen Marden? You remember that girl? I went with her and looked at a Renault 18 Turbo in...
Was that the one where you dolled yourself up in suits and went to test drive it?
No, that was a Sierra Cosworth. I
That's
drove a Sierra Sapphire Cosworth with her, right? And we had this whole thing worked out where we acted like we were a young family. You know, it was really...
The Sapphire now is the bargain Cosworth. But that one that I sent you the pictures of at Goodwood, that was 60k. That RS 500.
Oh,
So
the RS 500s have entered stupid territory, haven't they? The Sapphires, for me, what I drove, F plate, gunmetal, Sapphire 2-wheel drive. For me, that is the car that I would want. And I tell myself that the Fiesta has about the same power as it had. I tell myself that. And then I was watching Salvage Rebuilds UK, and they're at an auction. And there is a grey early one there that, until they opened the hood and it had all been cheesed up under the hood, you know, that car was. I don't give a shit if it's got a bad history. You know, those cars have bad histories. Were I a collector, I would have one. Were I able to bring, you know, proper resources to bear, I'd buy a nice example of it. And, you know, I'd drive it, you'd drive it, it'd be in a storage place. We'd have one.
Oh, dude, well, I mean, if the crypto does go to the moon, then we could go halves on one. Because they're not, the Sapphires haven't left the building yet. Harry was at Silverson's classic auctions recently, and there was one, I think 20 to 30, 20 to 25. It was a Sapphire Cosworth.
That's the one.
In pretty mint.
That's the one. That's the one that you'd want, because you know, and yeah, I would definitely go Harvard's. Go Harvard.
Yeah.
The other thing is when money
too hard to get me into it.
The other thing is when money's cheap to borrow again, borrowing money to do something like that isn't so stupid, because if you only pay off the interest, so what? The car's still going to be worth whatever you paid for it, if not more than that, should you ever need to part with it. So there's interesting jiggery pokery you can do with nice classic cars. With shitty ones, not so much. But we know.
Well, and that's the other reason I want the place in France. I'll have space, but thrown in is the fact that you've probably got a 2-car garage, whatever you want to call it, and the fact that you can pretty easily put a sort of wooden, you know, outside wall-less kind of place in to get another sort of 3 or 4 cars in, and whilst you're at it, probably dig an inspection pit in there as well.
So when I went with Helen to look at the 18 Turbo, it was red. It was a Mark 1. It had those strake wheels like your dad's. Remember your dad had that Fuego GTX, and it had the same wheels on it. Renault, a piece of Renault design genius, in my humble. When this 18 had lost drive shafts, which killed most of those cars, right? Looking back, such a silly thing to lose them for, but it was a asshole job, and Devon mechanics weren't keen to work on the car. When it had been moved to the breakers yard, they'd craned it, and they'd craned the roof, and they pinched the roof. So the roof was crushed in. So this car was in the Auto Trader at £175. And because the roof was crushed in, I remember the guy saying to me, I couldn't sell you that car. Like, that is not the car for you, mate. And, oh, man, I wish I'd said to him, no, sir. There are many people in Plymouth who can weld and can beat that straight. I am confident in my own taste that one day, many years from now, people will say a red Renault 18 Turbo, that is the pinnacle of Radwood cool. I too don't like red, but I mean, talk about one that should not have
dude, like I might have even mentioned before on this thing that Angie's housemate's Renault 5 sort of dark silver GT turbo that they had, that I could have had off them for about 1,800 quid, and I just didn't. Didn't have 2 brass farthings at the time to rub together. But
Mark II,
I would have liked
it was a Mark II, wasn't it? It wasn't. It was like a second generation. I remember the car.
But like, still, I mean, you know,
Yeah, I remember that and feeling that because they were 10 a penny at the time, it was frustrating, but you had to let it go. Um, the other car we looked at around about that period was that bloke who ran the bacon sandwich van near your office,
Oh
and
yeah,
he had
yeah,
that
yeah,
Volvo 740 Turbo. 'Cause
yeah.
those have come into their own, haven't they? And we didn't have it because it had been towing its whole life, and we were put off by that, like as if we
Well,
were.
you'd also done like 180k or something, and
As, yeah,
had issues.
as if we weren't put off by the fact that it was utterly clapped out. We were put. I
Absolutely
was,
fucked.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Again, right? Yeah, again, a tragedy that one that haven't got away. And we should do an.
But that man made a fine bacon sandwich. Let me give him his due.
Let's just pause, right, and just almost have a moment's silence, certainly from this side of the pond, for that man's bacon sandwiches. That Volvo made noble sacrifice
Oh,
towing the wagon, which turned out bacon sandwiches of that caliber.
nothing complicated about him. Cut loaf. It wasn't a cut loaf. He had proper loaf, and he would slice the doorsteps off with his knife. Give you a couple of nice bits of a fresh English white tin, crusty tin sandwich there, sir. One piece of bacon in each half of the thing. Nothing complicated, but it was thick cut from a local farm where he knew the bloke. And yeah,
um, I need an SUV because my son's got this motorcycle now, and pickups open. I
you
need
live
an
in
SUV.
Central San Francisco. Of course,
So,
you need an
so
SUV.
obviously, I started out sensibly looking at Tahoes, and that rapidly
Right.
degenerated onto government deals websites looking for
Okay.
X police pursuit vehicle Tahoes. It's 2-wheel drive with the motor. You can. So I was looking at those, and then for a while, but then I hit upon the most sensible SUV I could possibly think of. I've long wanted AMG 63 motor, and previously I'd thought about E classes or something like that. But why not just wrap? Why not use this as the opportunity, the SUV as the opportunity to get the 63 motor? ML 63s, early high mile ones, they're only $10,000 or $15,000 now. What could possibly go wrong?
Oh,
What
oh, nothing.
what could possibly go wrong with an old hot rod Benz that looks like an
Oh,
SUV?
nothing. I can't see as anything could cost you more than about tuppence halfpenny to repair on that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. So what with the fact that I have my tame Mercedes mechanic, Hugh Winco, total shout out, guy's a total legend and knows Mercedes. If you are in the Northern California area, Hugh Winco in San Francisco is your man for old Mercedes. With him on board, I'd do it. Whenever you
yeah,
say to
I
him,
mean,
should I buy some old, scary, fast old Mercedes? Um, he always goes, yeah. And you can see
then
him.
by buying
You can
himself
see the
another
dollar.
15 years of custom. Yeah,
Yeah, well, exactly, right. I know that's what he's thinking, but I'm also not wanting to buy something that he doesn't want to work on. You have to be.
yeah, yeah.
So by
True, true.
saying
That doesn't mean
that,
he's entirely sort of. Yeah, yeah,
I'm
no, for sure.
anyway. So my favorite at the moment is the ML63. You own a chateau in France. What's in the stables? Because it's a
Not
chateau.
horse,
It's a
not
chateau. You've
horses.
got loads of room. What's in there? Just tell me some of the stuff that's in there.
I mean, not horses. Several dirt bikes. Because I now own a chateau and I've got land to ride around on. I'd have a Delta Integrale before they've completely left the building. You can probably pick one up in France, and they're all left hookers anyway, so
Color,
why not? Huh?
color,
White,
nice,
I think,
nice. Grey
because
wheel,
then it would look extra cool with the spatters of dirt from the drive up it all the time.
yes.
um, uh, and then at the moment, I'd do a 612 on a stick for the
Oh,
international cruising.
yeah, yeah. Um, I would do all of the sports bikes with like nice paving. I would do the most interesting vehicle I saw the whole time I was in France, this electric BMW moped. I really want one of those. I'd really love to have one of those. So I'd have one of those in the chateau. I would do. I feel like if you've got a place like that, well, I don't know. I'd be inclined to do. Yeah, your imagination runs wild. Let me, as I see the time is creeping on. What is the most air you've ever gotten? What car? When? Where? Who? Where? What? When? How?
Either that 2-liter cut new edge styled Ford Focus that I had from Fastnet before it became Redstone, and the bridge to Bramley, where if you jumped it one way, you might, if you were a hypothetical friend of mine, break a TT transaxle. Potentially, that could happen theoretically. It didn't happen, obviously, because that wouldn't have happened to a company car with the Cisco rep sitting in the passenger seat who hit his head on the ceiling. That didn't happen, but it might have happened, but it didn't. But if that had happened, that bridge going the other way, I got about a foot and a bit. But I told my buddy, who I think is still at Cisco now, when he had his Westfield, when we were coming on the back roads to around that place we lived at just south of Reading. What's it called? Near the Common.
Aldermaston.
The road south of there was a back road bridge, and I said to Stu, who was fully footing the floor of that little Westfield kit car that he had his foot through the firewall, and I said to him as we approached the little bridge, over jump, meaning, dude, slow down. And he thought I meant over jump, as in I was repeating things from Colin McRae Rally, and it was a joke, and kept his foot in. And we went over the bridge at a rapid rate of knots. I don't know how high we were, but it felt high. And I remember looking down through the windscreen at the front road, and there was this horrible grinding. And when we stopped after bouncing a bit, Stu got out looking pretty worried. And what it was we ground the front number plate against the road as he slid down it like that, and the car was fine, no problem at all. Just some artistic scuffs to the number plate. So I suspect that was probably the highest. So technically, I was in the passenger seat for that.
That is a good story. I'd never heard that one before. It makes stuff like that makes doing this pod feel kind of worthwhile. Mine was at your wedding. Or the stag do. Do you remember I had that Alfa Brera rental car, red 2.4 litre diesel manual, and the house you were living in,
Douglas Harder rear seats.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. The house you were living in at the time, just on the way out of the town, like towards the A4, there was a humpback bridge, wasn't there?
Oh yeah, Kint Bridge is part of the.
If you got the angle right, if you sort of straight lined it, which you could do at night because you could tell lights weren't coming the other way. If you straight lined it, you could hit it really hard. And living there, being with you for a week or so, I got used to driving that road, and I hit that bridge really hard, and it felt like I was the bloody Dukes of Hazzard in that moment, right? Really, it was all right. The best race you ever saw?
Well, live, some of the stuff at Goodwood, various races, has been utterly spectacular, especially at the end of the day on a Sunday where the sun's streaming through the trees on the other side of the track down towards Fordwater and stuff. It's just gorgeous. But some of the best races I watched, that race, I can't remember where it was, but it was in Italy, where Rossi passed Lorenzo at the last corner and lost the front and the back and caught them both at a corner where it's not a passing place and won the race. That MotoGP race was one of the finest races I've ever watched. MotoGP features in actually for quite a lot of some of the best races I've ever seen. That race between Rossi and Stoner at Laguna Seca where he went off into the gravel and it was just pass. The Ducati was faster, and Rossi could pass him through the corners but couldn't hang with him down the straights. So Casey would get him every time. And then, I mean, Rossi was knees and elbows and riding the curbs and everything. And it was a real shame that Stoner ran off into the gravel at the end of lap 10 or 12 or something, because it spoiled the rest of the race. But some of those races were amazing.
Yeah. You've a good memory for the MotoGP races. I think I you know what comes to mind? We went to see British touring car in the epic period. We were talking about the Lagunas, and I feel like it to see that was super close racing. I can't remember a specific race, but that was probably the best racing that I've ever seen live.
I mean, some of the stuff, you remember Gabriele Tarquini in that Alpha that he used to, that in the pissing rain, he would accelerate his way back straight with the front wheel drive. Oh,
yeah.
Tip of the hat.
Yeah.
God tier shit.
I'm actually the memory of those.
Was it 155 touring car, that thing?
Yeah. Well, that was the car that sort of broke touring car, wasn't it? It took them away from narrow body, narrow tire to being like crazy hot rods. The cars really changed at that point. But my memory is Silverstone when it rained and we got stuck in the field. In my Vectra. I just remember my company Vectra and just being stuck in the field and just being like, this is such a Silverstone moment, but so insane. And just for the record, we weren't the ones who were stuck. It was people, the entrance to the field gets muddy and then people get their cars stuck pulling out of the field. So we weren't stuck. Other people got stuck. We just had to wait for the tractors to come to pull them out. But we didn't like leave the circuit till 11 o'clock at night or some kind of craziness, did we? It was totally like.
Well, that happened to me on Metallica gig at Donington some years later, and I just slept in the car and left the next morning. I just pulled on the handbrake where I was and just turned the car off. And like other people pretty quickly realized I wasn't moving anymore and just drove around me. And I think we left at like 8 a.m. the next day. As a result, directly of what happened at Silverstone, I thought, I'm not doing that shit again. I'm just going to check out of this as early as possible and accept I don't need to be anywhere until lunchtime tomorrow. I'm staying here.
Good thinking. Best corner you ever stood at? I'll go first. Ooh. Do you remember one day we decided to take a day off work and that we would follow the RAC rally in Wales?
Yeah, I was probably going to come to the same corner conclusion. So
and we were like, oh, we'll follow and we'll do this and we'll do that. And we hiked through the woods and we found that piece where we were standing when the Colin McRae's and so on came through, they threw stones at us. And we made the great decision to cross the road, not realizing that there was ditch on the inside. And we were like scrambling up the inside when Bruno Sabi came by, like as far away as he must have been 3 feet away from us as we were struggling up the bank. What a moment.
I remember standing there thinking, I can't get out of the way here. I'm just going to have to get as far back as I can without falling down this ditch. And he came fast with the headlights on us and drifted past us within 2 or 3 feet. Yeah. Because before that, Ewa Kankinen sprayed us with gravel.
That was why we moved.
Thinking, oh, wow, I just got sprayed with
it was like, because we were still on the outside. Yeah. So Sabi came through, and I remember then we attained the top of the bank. And we were there for a little bit, and then no other cars came through. And we were like, oh.
Yeah.
And we walked up the track, and then there was that Subaru halfway down the cliff, held in the cheese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It rolled down and got stopped by the saplings, hadn't it? And rolled on down the hill. Yeah. That was pretty intense. I was also shitting myself.
Well, yeah, because it was all dark, always dark. Oh, so dark, wasn't it? Yeah. That's the thing with, maybe that's what's changed about motorsport, is that there was a wildness about what could happen wasn't there, and that made it attractive. Makes it attractive.
Yeah, I mean, we made some dumbass mistakes in terms of what we did for that, but nevertheless. And also these days, everyone's carrying a torch and a camera and a video recorder and a tracking device and all that sort of stuff on them, which of course we didn't have.
Well, lucky we can tell the stories, Mark. And that's a nice way to wrap it up, isn't it? Because I'm going to end with a thought that you were talking about visiting Modena, and Ferrari is a guy full of interesting quotes and thoughts and so on. And remember, at the end, Ferrari's great fear was losing the memories. That was the fear, forgetting what was. So yeah. So on that note, we've preserved what has been of our recent history.
Mm-hmm.
See you next time.
Take it easy, bud.